welcome to a Thursday edition of the First Things First podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Wolf. Catch us Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Tell us what you think and leave us a review. Time now to bring in Nick and the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. Let's head to the NBA. Kevin Durant is having a very strange week, and by strange, I mean he was caught tweeting negative things about his old team. This and several other off-season incidents have reportedly caused his teammates and team officials to be perplexed by the Finals MVP's off-season behavior. Nick, I ask you, should the Warriors be concerned about Durant yet?
I mean, when a guy says to the national public, I haven't eaten or slept in 2 days, I think you're going to be concerned. When a guy tells the world...
It's not like he got a bunch of fat stored up either.
Right. Right. He can't afford it.
Can't be hibernating.
Yeah, man, he could slip down the drain.
When KD tells the world that shortly after picking the Warriors, he had something of a panic attack, called his business manager, Rich Kleinman, and said, why did you let me bleep up my life? When Durant tells the world he has multiple ghost social media accounts to engage in it, not to engage in debates with like other players or established members of the media, but just random anonymous kids on the internet. When Kevin Durant is posting YouTube comments, trying to be like, I'm Kevin Durant, and I'm just like you.
Okay, well.
Which is what it was. Hey, I have acne, and I drink beer, and I play Xbox. He is grasping for something that, despite all of his success, despite the fact that if he never played another basketball game in his life, he's one of the 25 best to ever do it. Despite the fact that he's an MVP and now a Finals MVP and now a champion, there is something that is still eluding him. Yeah, that's concerning.
I could see why you would be concerned, but, to me, he's still at, say, that critical juncture in his career and in his life. I don't want to, but I have to bring LeBron into this because LeBron, I've been a resident of South Florida for a long time. So when LeBron came to South Florida, and then also knowing LeBron and people close to him, that LeBron thought he was making the best decision. But he ended up having some regrets in going to Miami. Maybe the way the decision was depicted, that, and then also he became a villain. But he tried to embrace being a villain, and then after losing against Dallas, he realized, you know something? I'm not that guy. I'm going to go back to being the LeBron that I know. Like, I don't care if people hate me, but I'm not going to try to use that as fuel. And it turned him into the person that we have seen these last number of years on and off the court, which I believe is the best of LeBron. So for me, I'm concerned, but I want to see where KD goes from here because it's not a number, a figure, but there is a thing in life that people seek. It's called happiness. And it doesn't seem like KD, with all the things that he decided he wants to do, he's playing the game that he's always loved to play. Like, I'm wondering, where does this take him? Like, when is he going to ever be happy?
If not after this season. If not after this, the pinnacle of his career. Go ahead.
So let's talk about the news that now maybe his organization is actually a little bit concerned about him. My feeling is, let's see what happens the first day he steps on the court to start practicing with the team. Because we've seen in the NBA other guys who've had off-the-court things, distractions, odd life directions, Dennis Rodman, Allen Iverson, like they let them have their crazy offseason, whatever you want to call it, because they all came and they showed up and they performed. Do you think we're going to be talking about this if he comes in, he's the same exact Kevin Durant that we've seen last year? Or should we be so concerned that
No, he's going to be, right now, if I had to bet on someone to win MVP for the season, I'd bet on Durant. Like, we all know LeBron should be the guy that wins it, but LeBron doesn't win him anymore. I would bet on Durant. I think Durant's going to be awesome.
So what bothers you so much about this?
Because the concern is, Cris brought up LeBron. LeBron's first year ended with his lowest basketball point ever, and he responded positively. It followed up by his best basketball moment ever. Kevin Durant's first season ended with the new team with his highest basketball moment ever, and he responded negatively. That's concerning about Durant, the guy. And that's concerning about whether or not this type of whatever tortured soul he's dealing with, and not to overstate it, how sustainable that is. We have seen so many things this summer that were potential. That's curious. And I hate to harp on it, but the cupcake shoes followed up by the internet comment shoes, those were, what do we make of that? But then when it's followed up by, oh yeah, and I defend myself on the internet anonymously, then it's like, okay, it snaps into focus. You are the one second-guessing your decision. You are the one wondering if you, to quote yourself, effed up your life. You are the one that is still not at peace despite all the success. And that's why the court for him does not appear to be a sanctuary, because he's not going to be better than he was last year. And you're not going to get the feeling of the first championship again. And that wasn't enough to make him at peace.
The reason why you'd be concerned is because this is a special part of basketball history for Golden State. I mean, they have a rare opportunity. I mean, they could win 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6. Like, they could win a number of championships. And this organization, how it's run, the men who own it, there's not a whole bunch of visibility around them. There's not a whole bunch of noise coming out of Golden State. They got a great locker room. They got one guy that takes some maintenance. That's Draymond. Right. All right? And Coach Kerr, he handles that, and the organization has handled a number of Draymond issues. They did not think this was the Kevin Durant that they were getting. So also, let's not forget, in some of the things that are alarming, he also criticized Steph Curry.
Yeah, so nobody buys Under Armours.
Yeah, like, I mean, those things just aren't necessary. They're not an organization that wants that type of attention. And this is a special time in basketball for Golden State, and they should be taking advantage of it. That would be my concern.
And the other thing, sometimes with pro athletes, we do a weird thing where we treat them as adults when they're still kids and kids when they're adults. Like there's 21-year-old NBA players that have been in the league 3 years, and we're acting like they're not still 21 years old.
Right.
But Kevin Durant turns 29 next week. Now, 29 ain't 50, but at 29, I was married with 3 kids. You were married with 2 kids.
Yeah.
At 29, you're closer to being a fully formed adult than you are a kid. And
in most professions, that wouldn't even be a question, except professional athletes.
Right. Yes. I mean, in most there is no.
Like in tennis, you're retired 8 years.
Sure,
already,
but there is as far as take the athletic part out of it. Like, I'm not talking about the length of your career. Just we have people that work with us that we rely on for this television show every day that are right around that age, and none of them would get away with and he didn't screw up at work. I get that. The excuse of he's just a kid. Like, no. Like, you're grown now. Yeah. Like, you're about to figure out how to apply for a mortgage and get your debt in order and your credit. Like, and so it is weird. And weird is the best way to put it, to see KD engaging in the type of stuff that you would expect to see from, like, the top recruit. Like a guy that's, going on, oh, yeah, I'm going to argue with you on the internet. Yeah, I'm going to defend myself. I'm going to take shots at people that I really don't want to take shots at. Like in those tweets where he took a shot, not just at his teammates, not just at Billy Donovan, but the Oklahoma City organization, an organization that coddled him and protected him, and maybe that's the other thing that we are not analyzing enough. Cece, when KD was in Oklahoma City, when they succeeded, it was Durant's credit, and when they failed, it was Russ's fault.
Yes.
He got criticized once, Jenna. I don't know if you remember this. Years ago in a playoff series, the Oklahoman local newspaper called him Mr. Unreliable. And they printed an apology the next day. That was his environment. Everyone hated LeBron, so everyone loved him. So maybe he just wasn't equipped for what he's had to deal with the last 11 months.
Well, when he went to Texas, he was only there briefly, and they definitely protected him because I've talked to one of the coaches that was there with him. We know what happened in OKC, and now Golden State, they didn't know what they were inheriting, and this is what they're getting.
Let's start with the Dallas Cowboys quarterback, Dak Prescott. Prescott is coming off arguably one of the worst games as a pro, throwing 2 picks with passer rating of 68. Among the criticism he received for this play, former Panthers and Steelers running back D'Angelo Williams had this to say.
Dak is a clock manager. Dak is not one of those guys that's going to come and win football games. When you go down 14 or 21 points, that's when Dak, he can't bring you back from that. And bringing you back from that, in my opinion, means winning the football game, not making it where it looks easy or even on paper, but it didn't lose by that many. Once Dak gets down and you can't run the football anymore, you're forcing Dak to make precision throws that Dak is not really comfortable throwing.
Both of you guys shaking your heads listening to that comment. Is Dak Prescott a clock manager, CC? Or just a clock manager?
Well, first of all, let's go to what a clock manager is, because I think I made 8 different Pro Bowls with 5 different quarterbacks, and a couple of those were clock managers or game managers. There's a couple of different ways you can call them. And why are they called that? Is because the team is not depending on their overall arm to be able to get them big plays. Either they're going to schematically have a scheme, a perfect play against the right defense, or they're going to run the ball in obvious passing situations, so they punt. They consider punting winning, and they have an outstanding defense. So they're just trying to manage the clock because they're going to get turnovers from their defense, and their coach has them kind of on a pitch count where we talk about Ben McAdoo. He has the big play sheet and everything. A game manager, that play sheet, it might be big, but he's only calling a certain portion of those plays. And Dak is everything but that. You know, so much respect to D'Angelo. I know he's retired. He's probably trying to cut his teeth in this business, but I've been doing this long enough to know. He just retired. He doesn't know that much about the rest of the NFL because as a player, you're so focused on that week and who you're playing, and definitely an offensive play. Unless it's your position, it's really hard for him to have some expertise on another position. A guy who's only played 1 year, and he hadn't been down by that but a couple times. And the one time in the playoff game against Green Bay, that was the situation. He was down.
And what did he do? He brought him back.
He brought the team back.
He outdueled Aaron Rodgers. I like D'Angelo Williams a lot. And you mentioned, and it's a good point, that you're not really studying. If you're an offensive player, the only other offensive players you're studying are your contemporaries, the guys you're competing with for stats or Pro Bowls. So he's probably not studying it that much. But the second most watched sporting event in America last year was the Packers-Cowboys playoff game. So the Super Bowl won that game too. And what happened? We heard D'Angelo say, he's not the type of guy where if you're down 14 points, he can bring you back. Okay. But evidently he is the type of guy where if you're down 15 points, he can bring you back. Because they were down 28-13 in that game.
Yes.
It was then 31-31 with 3 seconds remaining. And it took an amazing Mason Crosby field goal to keep that game out of overtime. Dak, in that game, outdueled Aaron Rodgers. Aaron was very good. Dak was outstanding. This is a weird thing we do, and we did it to Russell Wilson as well.
And others.
Which is, Russell's the one that comes to mind first to me, because for Russell, it was the defense.
Yes.
For Dak, it's the offensive line. We do a weird thing when guys don't have to carry teams. We assume they couldn't carry teams. Yeah. We never do that on the opposite. When the Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson thing was a real debate, right? People would say, well, we don't know if Russell could do what Andrew Luck does. But no one asks the other side. could Luck do what Russell is asked to do?
Absolutely.
Could the quarterbacks that are asked, hey, you got to go throw for 300 yards, make big plays, if they were on a better team, could they scale it back to not make the mistakes? Dak's job last year was not to throw for 350 yards, but it absolutely was do not kill us with turnovers. And for some reason, we act like that part's an easy skill. Oh, it's easy to not, as a rookie quarterback, make awful throws, have strip sacks, throw into double coverage. So we know what Dak's great at, and in the few instances he's had a chance to show, but if you need me to go for 300, I can go for 300. He's done it more often than not.
Which leads you to wonder what D'Angelo's watching.
It's the narrative.
Him to say, right, it's the narrative. It's exactly that. It's if he doesn't do it, can he not do it? But my question to you is, when quarterbacks come into the league, are they all assumed to be, game managers, clock managers, and then they work their way out of it? Or are there guys that come in that you say, that's a guy that's just going to really manage this team, and that kid over there, that kid's going to be able to throw 300, 350, 400 yards?
No, great question. A lot of it's based on what their arm talent is. That means how hard they can throw the football, all right, how quick their release is, and how often can they vary the speeds and the direction of the football. Because throwing the ball hard that's a skill that they want. But if all you have is a fastball, Jamarcus Russell and others who have a big, big arm, but they don't have the other skills that come with arm talent. So typically, if their arm is not a strong arm, they are put in a category of they're going to have to manage the game. Because in the NFL, if you can't, because the hash marks are in the middle of the field, if you can't throw the ball, it's a deep out almost every time. It's not like college, where you only have it half the time. It's moved all the way over to the sideline, and they don't throw the ball to the field as much. So if your arm is weak, you can be put in that category as a manager. But the big-time talented guys, and depending on who their surroundings are and the philosophy of the coach.
But at some point, narrative has to start to align with the data, or we've got to change the narrative. To me, the most telling stat, unless you're out there throwing a ton of interceptions, the most telling stat for quarterbacks is yards per attempt. Every time you drop back to throw the ball, on average, how many yards does your team gain? That incorporates incompletions, incorporates completion, incorporates all of it. Game managers, clock managers are the Alex Smith types, Alex Smith prior to this season, where it's been a revelation, where they have a high completion percentage. They're not throwing a lot of picks, but it's dink and dunk. It's little crossing rights to the tight end. It swings out of the backfield to the running back.
Is that a bad thing if they're winning?
Well, no, but to finish the point quickly, Dak's yards per attempt, 7.6. To give that some context, if that number doesn't mean anything to you, it is 6th amongst all active quarterbacks, behind Ben Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Phillip Rivers, guys that nobody would call game managers. The data shows that he is more than that, and when he's been asked to be more than that, like in the comeback last year against Philly, like in the playoff game against Green Bay, like the Steelers game where he went and dueled Ben Roethlisberger 35-30, he's been more than that.
If I was Dak, I would take this as a compliment. Because, Nick, who's the most accomplished quarterback in pro football history?
I know Tom Brady.
Okay.
I know what you're going to say.
Do you realize maybe in the last 8 years, we removed that from him?
Right.
Oh, he's a game manager. They only win because it's New England. They only win because it's Belichick. And then they start winning because of Tom Brady.
It took the 2007 season. Up until the 2007 season, that's what we called him.
And the philosophy offensively was they're going to attack him with Tom Brady. You can come into a game and Tom Brady will throw the ball 45, 50 times. The next week he might only throw it 20 times. So Tom Brady, hey, Dak, if you grow up to be like Tom Brady,
it's all good.
Like, this has worked out for you.
Mark, good to have you here. So the Patriots face the Texans on Sunday. Tom Brady looked like the Tom Brady of old in Week 2 as opposed to just looking old in Week 1. See where I went there? Brady was asked about playing Houston this week and made it very clear it's definitely going to be a challenge.
You know, a very tough, hard-nosed team. They have some incredible players, one of the best defense in the league. They're really good, really talented. They play hard. They're disciplined, play a lot of fundamentals. Our coaches do a great job preparing them. So, it's just it's a good test.
So, Cece, a lot of people would look at this matchup and say, why in the world would the Patriots not be looking past the Texans? Tell me why it is that the quarterback is out there talking about how tough this is going to be for him.
Well, one reason what makes Tom Brady special, and this is what makes most of the great players in the league, that they can focus on the task at hand. And there always have to be the appropriate amount of respect for any opposition in the NFL. I don't care which team I've ever played. They were all very, very talented. Now, were there times where I had a mismatch? Yes, but I never made myself think so. I always thought that I was going to be at a disadvantage, or someone who was guarding me was less talented, that they would help him out to give them an advantage. So I always played the trick on my mind. And the times that I didn't, and I took someone lightly, or they had a starter who was out and an injured player was in for him, those were not the best games that I've ever played. And players, they know this. Tom Brady, Belichick, they're robotic about it. And this is how you're able to sustain success in the NFL, taking it week by week by week, methodically, respecting the opposition. Not worrying about next week, not worrying about week number 5. No, because it really does not matter. And anytime you don't look across the field and be like, Jadeveon Clowney, don't respect him. Whoa, Defensive Player of the Year. A couple times, J.J. Watt, not going to respect him. All right, you're going to have a bad day. And people, no one's got this game figured out. You can get humiliated. Look at Dallas, what happened to them. Look what Brady, what happened to them week number 1. Drew Brees, what happened to him? Aaron Rodgers, they got smashed in Atlanta. This is what happens in the National Football League. And if you take your eyes off the opposition, and let alone it being a great defense, not a bad defense, a great defense. New England said they were worried about New Orleans defense.
That was a lie. That one was a lie.
That's why they put 400 on them, because they were worried about them.
Yeah.
And the more you can trick yourself to respect and give that respect that they're getting ready to get their best game, which New England, everyone gives them their best game. So I understand Tom Brady, and that's part of the secret sauce that makes him special.
There's two ways that teams try to defend Tom Brady. They draft. The Houston Texans will look at their defense, and they'll draft, and they'll pick players accordingly to try to say, hey, who are the best guys? Who are we going to face in the playoffs? Who are the guys that we have to be concerned with?
Patriots keep knocking them out in the playoffs.
Right, and it's Tom Brady. And so two ways. You've got to, in your back end, you got to have guys that can play man coverage, who can bust up them man routes, who can get up in press, knock guys off their routes, disrupt the timing of your passing game. And you've got to have guys up front. Whitney Merciless, he can flat out play.
Yes.
Jadeveon Clowney, he can rush the passer. J.J. Watt, we'll see what he comes back to with the back injuries. But J.J. Watt, for a time, was the best player I have ever watched from moving around. Now, I played against Reggie White. We both did. You played with Reggie White. Reggie White was phenomenal, one of the best I've ever seen. And he moved up and down the line of scrimmage. There has never been a player that was a better pass rusher at multiple positions than J.J. Watt in the history of this game. A guy that could line up over your right tackle, over your right guard, over your left guard, over your left tackle, and dispense justice against every one of those guys. And I've never, ever seen his equal when healthy doing that.
And you keep mentioning when healthy.
So, and if I'm Tom Brady and I'm doing this, I'm looking over at 99 going, who's got him? Like, how are we going to do that? So I'm 100% with, when you prepare as an offensive player for a defense, I don't care that their offensive line hasn't blocked their way out of a wet paper sack yet. I don't care that. I'm looking at the guys that I have to contend with, and those guys are legitimate, and they have that closeness to Brady from where they line up that can really put a damper on his day. So, yes, of course he thinks they're great.
Well, and I think part of it is what Cris is saying, which is you always want to respect your opponent, even if there's a part of your brain that's like, the Saints defense stinks. You trick yourself into believing it. But the Texans, the unit that's easy to respect is the defense.
Sure.
It's the unit that's carried this team the last 4 years.
Yes.
It's the unit that has multiple Pro Bowlers on it. It's the unit where they have Whitney Merciless, Clowney, Watt, Kareem Jackson, Kevin Johnson, Brian Cushing, well, he's out now, but they have 7 first-round picks. in their defense. Like they have spent a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of talent there. So that makes sense. The flip side is the Texans offense, which is what Brady's not worried about, is going to present this team with no trouble. And everyone in New England knows that. Like they might not say it publicly. Rookie quarterbacks coming into New England since Bill Belichick's been there, they are 0-8 with a passer rating of 51. Yeah. Little context on that. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I do believe that Brady was 105-0 in the fourth quarter with the lead until he met the Kansas City Chiefs.
That's true. There you go.
So those things,
Give
those
him that
things,
stat right back.
Occasionally, you got a problem with my stats. No, you got a problem with my stats.
Yes.
And it worked.
Yes.
You're 100% right that week one was the big, at least in that instance, a lot of these 105-0, 53-1, a lot of those trends broke. The point that I'm trying to make about Deshaun Watson and the Texans is the Texans defense is going to have to be everything Brady says it can be and more in order to keep them in this game.
Okay, I know how they operate in New England. And over the last couple of weeks, you know what they'll have? They'll have a low-light defensive tape. And Bill Belichick will come in there and say, this right here, from week one, that's good enough to get you beat. We couldn't defend the run. This from week two, that's good enough to get you beat. And they'll flash up what we did poorly, and then all of a sudden they'll flash up a play that Watson did exceptionally well. And they'll say, this is good enough to get you beat. This is the kind of team, this is the kind of, you take these guys lightly. I just know how they're coached over there.
One thing they don't do in pro football, they put the game plan in. They don't tell Tom Brady who's quarterback in the other team. But what they do tell him is, and that offensive line, when they go into their meeting, we're going to double team 99 every play. So they have to change every protection because they haven't played against one guy they had to double team. So every play, they're going to double team J.J. Watt. So now it's a numbers count, all right? We got two guys going to block him, and you got the quarterback. So now offensively, you only got 8 guys, all right? They send 5 rushers. You only got 4 other blockers, all right? It's a numbers game, so Tom Brady should be concerned, all right? This is not the normal New England press conference where they just give you the normal coach speak or the coach answers. Going against this front, going against J.J. Watt, they have some serious problems. And anytime you have a problem protecting Tom Brady, it's paramount to the team. So watch what they do in this game. They won't be as aggressive, all right? Because they also know that there's a rookie quarterback. So the Texans aren't going to score 28 points.
I would go back to the Denver game last year. They go into Denver, and this is to your point. This will back you up some. They went into Denver knowing that the Denver Broncos offense was anemic, okay? Flat out anemic. Now, their defense was better last year in New England, but they knew it was anemic. They went in with a watered-down game plan. Brady completed less than 50% of his passes. It was 3-step drops. They're like, we are not going to get you hit like we got you hit in the AFC Championship game the previous year where you got hit 24 times and 4 sacks. He said, we're not going to let that happen to you. It was football 101 game plan. We're going to run it. You're going to throw it. It's all 3-step, 5-step, get the ball out of your hands. And they won a game, I think, 16-3.
16-3 is exactly what it was.
Well, let's just keep in mind, the reason people say stuff like this, are they going to overlook the Texans, that they don't realize, which you brought up, made a good point, is, and you did too, the quarterback's not looking at their offense. Tom Brady's only sitting down looking at their defense. And this defense presents a whole host of problems that Tom Brady's not going to overlook.
And they remember the playoff game against the Texans in Gillette last year, where it's 17-13.
If they had any quarterbacking at all, the Texans would have won that game. Their defense shut down the offense.
It was 17-13 at the half, and the Patriots had a punt return touchdown or a kick return touchdown in it. Texans played them real close, and Osweiler gave the game.
Last point. This is the only time Tom Brady has faced this front seven with a healthy J.J. Watt.
And healthy Clowney, because he wasn't 2 years ago.
So I would be concerned.
The Seahawks haven't really taken flight this season, scoring only 1 touchdown the first 2 games. Russell Wilson is 25th in passer rating behind studs like Mike Glennon and Josh McCown, she said sarcastically. Richard Sherman was asked about the struggling offense. Take a listen.
Well, honestly, they weren't really struggling. I mean, they were doing everything they needed to do in terms of time of possession and controlling the clock and things like that. You know, we got a lot of highly paid guys on our side of the ball. A lot of guys who play the game at a high level, and there's a certain standard that is expected, and we expect it from ourselves. So we expect that regardless of what happens on the other side of the ball. So at the end of the day, it's really on us.
So, guys, CC specifically, we've seen defenses carry struggling offenses. We've seen the Ravens do it. We've seen the Broncos do it. Mm-hmm. Is the Seattle defense doing that this year? Are they carrying this offense?
Absolutely, and they have for a long time. But, you have to analyze what Richard said. He talks about the money, okay, because everyone has the same salary cap. So the pie is this big. Now, they have decided that 70% of the pie, they're going to spend it on the defense. Now, all these guys have stuck together. Bennett, KD Wright, KJ Wright, Sherman, Earl Thomas,
Cam Chancellor.
all of them have supported each other in potential contract disputes. Like, say this offseason, instead of going out and getting another offensive lineman or two, they gave Cam Chancellor an extension. Mm. Now, is that really going to help Russell Wilson, which they gave over $100 million? So they haven't done anything to protect that side of the ball.
And they traded a wide receiver for Sheldon Richardson.
Sheldon Richardson.
I mean, yes.
Why?
They're going to play because they've drafted a lot of these guys, and for them to win the Super Bowl, their biggest problem is they messed up. They tricked off one Super Bowl. If they were two-time Super Bowl champ, we wouldn't even care. But for Richard, this is a constant theme, and it's constant tension, because I was on Philadelphia with Reggie White and that defense. That the only thing preventing them from winning the Super Bowl there was us, the offense. And there was some bad exchanges with them coming off the field with another turnover and telling us, hey, won't you guys finally do something with this? Yeah. So eventually it gets to you. One of the best teams to ever not win the Super Bowl, the 98 Vikings, NFL scoring record. Our defense is about 20th, 21st. There was plenty of bad exchanges after we scored 3 touchdowns. Is that enough for you? There was 2 games that season, Stink. We didn't score 30 points. You know what our record was, Stink? 15-1 in the regular season. We beat, in the divisional game, we beat Arizona, and then we lost to Atlanta. Because 2 games, the only 2 games we didn't score 30 points were the only 2 games we lost. You think it's not real tension? Yes, it is real tension. But Richard knows when they get blamed, it's going to be on the defense because that's where they're spending their money.
It's gotten to the point in Seattle, I think patronizing is the right word. Like my granddaughter sometimes will say, oh, it's adorable. And I think Richard Sherman looks at the offense and goes, it's adorable. Look at those guys. They try hard. So cute, right? They're not good. They're not good. They can't score.
No, it's not their fault.
Right. That's not their fault. They don't have any players. It's adorable. Look at them. Oh. And we're going to go out here and we're going to,
we're going to have to choke people out.
Right. And that's where they are right now. And I think it's the only way you can look at it because it's not their fault. It's not like they're not giving effort. They spend no money. I called a game last year. Called a game in Seattle, the 49ers versus the Seahawks. They had 3 guys starting that 2 of them shouldn't have been in the league up front, and 1 of them should have been a backup that you are on penitent knee praying never has to get in the game. Please, Lord, don't let this guy go in. And those 3 guys are starting. Like, I look at that and say, good luck. We're all counting on you.
Well,
and that's the way they're constructed. And they don't spend money there.
And you wonder if at this point it's too skewed. Like, to speak to Chris's point.
No, it is.
Well, and just to the actual numbers, Seattle, percent of the cap, money spent on defense, 1st in the NFL. Seattle, money spent on offense, 30th in the NFL. And keep in mind, the 2 teams beneath them aren't paying a quarterback $18 million. That's where, to me, it's skewed. We talked about the Texans earlier. If the Texans were like, listen, we're not, no matter what money we spend, we don't have a quarterback, we're not going to be able to score points, so let's just go all defense, I would get it. But once you have the quarterback,
right,
to have his second best player be with respect Doug Baldwin and his third best player be what's left of Jimmy Graham, and his best running back is Chris Carson? Like, that's where it gets skewed because you have the quarterback. You didn't need Sheldon Richardson. It was cool. When it happened, I was like, man, how's anyone going to move the ball on these guys?
Right.
You don't need – they might have the two best safeties in football. Like,
Yes.
both of them.
Right.
And that's awesome when they were.
Is this the plan? Is there a plan? Let's just do it. Let's just make sure this defense is so good. Other
Jenna,
teams have won on
Their plan
defense?
was this. Their plan was it worked. It was great when these guys were on their rookie contracts.
Yes.
The plan was we have kicked ass. Pardon me. We have killed it in the draft. We got Richard Sherman in the 5th round. We got guys that are on rookie contracts that are cheap. And by the way, we got our quarterback who's on a rookie contract who's cheap. We can have talent everywhere. But then they wanted to keep those guys. So to keep them, now that pie is getting smaller and smaller.
They have a great offensive line coach in Tom Cable, and they put it on Tommy Cable, and they say, Tommy, you listen, we're not going to give you a lot of we're not going to give you any talent. You're just going to have to coach them up. They are like from a management standpoint, they're like a toddler that's in one of those jumpy ball toy
I know
pins,
exactly what you're talking about.
And they want to hold every ball. And you're only so big, you only have so many, and you're holding like 7 balls, and you're trying to get that 8th one. And so you're trying to balance, and you reach down, and you pick one up, and then one falls out, and you're like, oh, wait, let me try to get, like that's their defensive players. They're just like, oh, they're collecting balls right now. Like, oh, there's a red one, there's a yellow one, there's a blue one, there's a green one. Oh, all the balls, I cannot wait. That's what they're doing. Like, meanwhile, offensively, they're not putting any balls in the
ball. Their big move this offseason was they signed Eddie Lacy. Right. But the thing about it was, Eddie Lacy, even though he looks like an offensive lineman, he's supposed to be a running back.
This will make you so happy. This year, Seattle and last year, dead last in the NFL in spending on the offensive line. The year they won the Super Bowl, most in the NFL in spending on the offensive line.
2-time Super Bowl champ and Giants radio analyst Carl Banks is here with us for more. Hey, Carl, how are you?
Good.
So we are going to get ready to discuss probably the game of the. Did you hit me under the table on purpose? You took my kneecap out.
Stuck.
You thought you just took my kneecap and pushed it to the other side. To say the Giants are off to a disappointing start would be an understatement, and things aren't about to get any easier. Odell Beckham Jr. is still limited in practice, and now rookie tight end Evan Ingram is in the concussion protocol. And now they get the Eagles in Philadelphia. Carl, not looking great. But what do you think how do you think the Giants will show up on Sunday?
Well, they've got to show up for sure. They got to get off that bus and they got to take the field. The key for the Giants right now is what Coach Parcells used to call circle the wagons. It's got to be complementary football. You know what you're not. You know where your strengths lie. You've got to be able to complement each other. Now, that said, the coach said that he's open to making adjustments. That means his offense has got to do some different things to protect the quarterback. Yes. That's the most valuable asset you have. But there's no rule that says if your offense goes 3 and out, that your defense can't do the same. They're not playing complementary football right now, in my opinion. And people have, in a sense, absolved the defense because the offense has been so bad. Well, they are supposed to be, and I think they are, this highly talented, really, really good defense, but they can't get off the field. So their time of possession, the opposing offense's time of possession is way up, and it limits the opportunities for the offense to get on track, the Giants. So I'm saying, and I'm sure that's what's going on in that building, defense, you got to step it up. You're the strength of our team. You better do more to get this offense back on the field. Right. And they're not. They can't get 3 and outs. They go 1 or 2 series where teams don't even see don't see a 3rd down. 1st down, 6 yards. 2nd down, 5 yards. They miss tackles. So they've got to do their part. I think they will. It's got to be complementary football. And I was talking to Cris. I think Coach McAdoo is a football guy first. He understands this game. He has a system that's a West Coast offense. It's not, right now, the quarterback in this offensive line is not allowing them to execute the way that they want. We're going to find out how flexible he is in, number one, play calling input, or if he's just giving it up and letting someone else do it. but they know what's not
He hasn't
working.
decided yet that, has he?
I don't know. I haven't talked to
Okay.
them, and they don't let me in those meetings. So,
Okay.
but I do know that he's a football guy, and he's a smart guy. So I'm pretty confident he'll do what it takes to at least protect this quarterback.
Sure.
For football fans out there, with West Coast offense, the best way to look at it is they're only going to use 5 offensive linemen, all right, to block how many other guys they have coming. But the Giants, in those one-on-one matchups, they don't fare well. So do I stay within the system that I know, which is West Coast, which is also 3 receivers or multiple formations, but a lot of times 3 receivers? All right. So do I get away from that? Do I go more to 2 tight ends? Do I go to more to the screen game to be able to get some camouflage to take the pressure off the offensive line? So just to explain his philosophy and what he likes to do. And Carl saying, do I know? Carl saying, I haven't seen it yet. So I haven't seen him change his system. Now, he did question, now, I might have to look at changes. Now, him, based on being in a number of different systems, that's what's important to Philadelphia. They need an offensive identity. So when they come out against Philadelphia, what formations are they in? Are they dominating a 2 tight end set? Are they trying to do the 3 receiver set because they have Sterling, they have Shepard, the young guy, they have Odell. How healthy is he? And Brandon Marshall. Like, what are they going to do with him? So those are the things immediately in this weekend's game that we must see.
And here's the thing about it. The Philadelphia Eagles, they have some issues on the back end.
Yes.
Right? So how do you get to them? It's like having a neighbor, right, who has a lot of jewelry and a pot of gold, and she walks out of her house and she leaves it right on the living room table. Come and get it. It's yours. You got to get by my Dobermans. That's what the Giants have got to do. They've got to figure out how to protect the quarterback because Philadelphia, they've got Rottweilers and Dobermans.
Brandon Graham, Fletcher
If you want that pot of gold, you got to get
they have a nice
those
security
guys.
system.
No, they're the front of their team, the D-line. I mean, I'm thinking Seattle is on the list. There's a few other teams you would put up there, but Philadelphia is in the discussion for the best defensive line in football.
And they create chaos.
They probably have, of every team in the league, the best combination of defensive and offensive line.
Sure.
That's where their team is built.
Sure.
They have one of the 5 best offensive lines in the league and one of the 5 best defensive lines in the league, which is good for Philly because the rest of the team is not that impressive.
Okay.
This is going to be, you mentioned the Giants' defense not looking like it did last year thus far. This is going to be far and away the worst quarterback they've faced. Giants have gone against Dak Prescott. He's one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league. Matt Stafford. CC thinks he's one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league.
I didn't say 10 best.
Okay, sorry.
But he's worth the contract that he.
Okay,
Stop hating on him about his money.
Okay, I'm not hating on him about his money, but that's not the point. Carson Wentz is not that guy. I came into this year.
I wouldn't discount Carson Wentz.
Thank you.
Don't discount that young man.
Thank
Here is
Well, let me just say, he's one of the best young quarterbacks in this league right now.
I think we're going to find out in a couple years that that's not accurate. I think that this is, and we'll see what happens. I watched Carson Wentz in week 1, and I was really impressed. Watched it with you, Chris.
Yes.
At the plays he made when he was in trouble. The plays he 3 separate times, it looked like a blitzer had him dead to rights. He was able to elude that blitzer, make passes down the field. One of them went for a touchdown. What was not impressive in that game and what was highly unimpressive in week 2 were the times he wasn't in trouble and he missed wide open guys. He missed his target 3 times against the Chiefs on screen passes. Not because he threw it into the ground, but because a screen pass, which it should be one of the easiest passes in the game, he was just errant. He was erratic.
Sure.
So you see some of the highlight plays from Carson Wentz, but right now the consistency is not there. I think the Giants seem to be able to take advantage of that.
Well, they may be able to, but let's talk about Carson Wentz as his career, even as his season goes. It's a 4-week. I give some of these players 4-week grace periods. He should be better after week 4. This is still training camp.
And then all his skilled players are new.
Right.
I think Carson Wentz is one of the great young talents in the league.
I agree.
Now, and it's not based on everything I've seen, all right? He's a better athlete, all right? He's got a big-time arm. And I believe that he'll be coached up the right way. Last year, the wide receivers led the NFL in drops, all right? So he didn't get a lot of help. So for me, this is a huge game for the Giants. It's a huge game for their defense because they need to create the turnover edge because that offense cannot beat the Eagles with them having no turnovers. If they don't get that offense, the ball on a short field, or get them 2 or 3 turnovers, the Giants are going to start the season 0-3.
The flip side to starting the season 0-3, I apologize, Jenna, is they win this game, they're 1-2. Washington's playing Oakland. Oakland's a road favorite. They're staring at 1-2. Dallas is on the road in Arizona. I expect Dallas to win that game. The Giants with a win, they could come in Tuesday morning after the Cowboys game Monday night and be tied for first in their division after the 0-2 start. Go ahead, Jenna.
Carl, looking at Eli Manning on the other side, Eli can't afford to have another game like he had last week. He needs a little more time. He certainly needs more protection. And we talked about this all week, that he had such little protection on the side, on that Eric Flowers side, that he wasn't. Changes weren't being made during the game to help him and give him a shot. So now you say, well, if you add a somewhat healthier Odell Beckham, you want to give this guy a chance to get the ball to Odell Beckham. What kind of changes now do you see McAdoo making to both give Eli a chance to be successful, and then how much do you play Odell Beckham when you know you really do need him?
Well, I think each week he should get better if he didn't have a setback, okay? But it comes down to protection and how you schematically put a plan together, because if you've got to hold guys in and still just send 3 guys out, now you're going 3 on 7. If they rush 4, and they can cover your 3 guys. So you've got to be able to do some different things formation-wise, and it may not be your 11 personnel anymore. It may be 2 tight end sets. They've got Evan Ingram, he's a willing participant as a blocker. Rhett Ellison is a blocker. You can get some guys. You can start to do some different things. And if they can run the football. Why did he do that last week,
or try to?
Well, he tried. They didn't have a lot of possessions, to be honest with you. And once you get behind, they want to try to chase points. And they just didn't have the opportunity. They couldn't run it, number one. They couldn't pass it. They couldn't protect the passer. So it was broken. Let's just call it for what it is.
I look for the Giants to play more 2 tight ends. I look for them to play more 2 backs, but also look for them to play 2 wide receiver sets. Also, put both wide receivers on one side. Go maximum protection, all right? Give Eli the time, all right? Even if you have to go play action. Play action is the best pass protection available. It makes it simpler for Eli, and people's like, well, at this point of his career, do you need to make it simpler? No, you need to make it simpler for the offensive line and give them some help, because Eli can't do his job unless they have a great outing. And this is the best defensive line that poor offensive line has faced.
Correct. They lead the NFC. The Eagles do with 8 sacks. The defensive line would lead the NFC in sacks by itself with 7 of them. And you're going up against an offensive line that just got dominated. But a Lions D-line that has one great player in Ziggy Ansah, but the rest of the guys are not guys you consider
they're complementary players. Yes.
However, let me add one thing before we move on. I said that I try to do this on Thursdays. Give America, as we did last week, a winner. If you can get yourself to Vegas, if you're watching from Vegas, your bet of the week last week was the Buffalo Bills +8. That's a cover. That's a winner. This week, the New York Giants getting 6.5 in Philadelphia. There's your Knicks pick for the week. It's a new segment I just created myself.
We need to get
There's no animation, no anything. There it is. There it is. I think the Giants are going to win the game, but don't bet them to win the game. Just take the 6 points. I think Giants win the game. Get back.
Carl, I'll be at the game.
All right, I'll see
Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate that. I will be betting the game.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody. Welcome to a Wednesday edition of the First Things First podcast. I'm your host, Jenna Wolf. Catch us Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Tell us what you think and leave us a review. Time now to bring in Nick and the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. It's the last day of summer, and we begin with the NBA, because Kevin Durant apologized for the uproar he caused on social media this week. Durant was caught tweeting in the third person saying, quote, he didn't like the Thunder organization or playing for head coach Billy Donovan. He discussed his use of social media yesterday.
I don't regret clapping back at anybody or talking to my fans on Twitter. I do regret using my former coach's name and that former organization that I played for. That was childish. That was idiotic. All those type of words. I regret doing that, and I apologize to him for doing that. But I don't think I'll ever stop engaging with my fans. I think they, really enjoy it, and I think it's a good way to connect us all. But I'll scale back a little bit right now and just focus on playing basketball.
So Durant went on to tell USA Today, quote, no, there's no different account. I was just on there talking. It kind of looked like that way. It did kind of look that way. I haven't slept in 2 days, 2 nights. I haven't eaten as well. Wait, what's I was going to ask for your reaction, but maybe I don't have to. You're eating this up.
All right, Kevin Durant I don't know who was in Durant's life growing up. I had a great man named Anthony Mange, my best Italian godfather, teach me at a very early age. There are sometimes three
How many Italian godfathers?
I have a bunch of them.
Okay.
He taught me at a very early age, sometimes there's only 3 words you need to know. Deny, deny, deny. You can never cop to this, KD. You had to go to your grave claiming you were hacked, you fired a social media manager, you can go the Ted Cruz route and say there was a young intern who had the account. I don't care. You can't admit to it. You certainly can't admit to it and then not fully admit to it.
Everything.
So, I sent the tweets, but I didn't think it was a different account. I just decided to go third person and talk about the Thunder as they and KD as he. And, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But most importantly, this is a real, in seriousness, window into KD's psychology on this. He is still struggling with his decision. He was not in that.
Yes, that's obvious.
Cece, he says in the longer version of that audio, I don't regret clapping back at people. He was not clapping back at people. If these tweets were, bleep you, KD's a champion, he's got $300 million,
right?
That's one thing. But they were not. He was relitigating his decision. He was engaging in the debate about whether or not he should have gone to Golden State. And that shows me, in his own head, even as an NBA champion and as a finals MVP, he is still conflicted about what he did.
Nick, I've said this before when you and I are working together. KD is what I believe to be a mama's boy, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think he has a very good relationship with his mother. It's endearing. They're very, very close, even at this stage of his life. And also, given some of the other things that I've seen, and most of the time when you're a mama's boy, you love to be liked, or you're always looking for approval. And I know LeBron, he's lived a different type of life because he's been under the microscope since he was 14, on the cover of many magazines at the age of 16, 17.
16, yep.
So how he's come up in the public light. And LeBron, he's a mama's boy. Well, that's all he had in his life. Mom's built a little bit different, but his dealing with rising to stardom has just been totally different. And you say, well, why would you bring LeBron into this? Because LeBron is the best player in the world. And we look at this information and we forget this is the second best player in the world. I mean, he's got a couple $100 million
at least.
I mean, and he's talking about, well, I still want to engage with my fans. He's not engaging with his fans. He's engaging with the people who aren't his fans. So, I mean, what we've seen in the last couple days from the NBA with Kyrie, with KD, to me, I beg the question, man, college is really important. Or just growing up around normal people, like it's really,
and this is why,
really
thank
important.
God, and thank God LeBron exists, because you football guys if this was the best basketball player in the world, would be able to call the entire sport a bunch of emo millennials.
Right.
Thank goodness LeBron is the standard bearer, because if he's not there and the best player in the league is doing this,
yes,
setting up fake social medias to argue.
If this is Tom Brady,
I can't.
If this is J.J. Watt,
can't deal.
I mean, both of them get so much criticism as it is for being great.
Wouldn't it be nice if he could just go on as Kevin Durant and respond in full honesty the way he wanted to respond, whatever he wanted to say, however he wanted to say it, and people wouldn't criticize him? I think that he would get the same backlash.
But he
now,
does that, Jenna. Jenna, he does that.
But he doesn't get to say, apparently he doesn't get to say exactly what he wants. He needs to create fake Twitter accounts for whatever reason to be able to say exactly what he wants to say.
Okay, wait 1 second. For the people in the public eye, tell me who is saying exactly what they want to say.
Because you can't.
No.
Because you feel like you cannot do that. I'm sure there are things you would love to be able to say that you just can't say.
Right.
And it's a different bevy of a list of things than Kevin Durant can't
And his
fully
level,
say.
My level of fame is nothing compared to his.
This isn't about money, and it's not about who raised him or where he came from. He wants to be able to fight back, to justify leaving Oklahoma City, and this was the only way he thought he could do it.
But he told us the justification would be the championship. The justification would be the winning.
Well, Kyrie also told you a lot of things that
But
weren't
we
exactly
now, at
true.
least with KD, the results are in.
Yes.
You won the championship. You hit the 3 over LeBron. And I'm sure after he hit that 3 over LeBron, he started a group chat with himself talking about how awesome it was. But the other things from these tweets, one of the tweets he sends, his roster wasn't that good. It was just him and Russ. That is, to quote your favorite show, that's kind of yada-yadaing the sex. Just him and Russ. It was just me and the 4th best basketball player alive. Can you imagine if Karl Malone was like, listen, I don't know what you want me to do in Utah. It's just me and John Stockton.
That's the point.
But I disagree with you on that point because, to me, see, I don't mind the truth part because I'm not in love with Billy Donovan as a head coach.
He took a shot at Billy Donovan as well.
Okay, no problem. Because I believe that there's some truth there. And he's not going to win a championship with him and Russ. And that's all that franchise does have is him and Russ.
See, they were up 3-1.
But they didn't win.
And still, it's his opinion, and he wanted to be able to say it. Okay. How else do you say it? Cris agrees with him.
No. I don't agree with how he went about it. But I'm just saying that's why I believe that. I mean, he's a lot like Kyrie being disingenuous. He said some things in there that would validate that it was him. I mean, the coach and Russ, those are legitimate. But be a man. Stop making all these other excuses.
But you just said nobody does that. You just said no one says exactly how they feel. So how can you say be a man?
Okay, listen. In this situation, I'm a free agent. I decide that I'm going to leave OKC. I talk to Russ, and when people ask me, I tell them I made the best basketball decision because I believe the owner, Jerry West at the time, the front office, Steve Kerr, they're better for me going forward. That's saying the same thing. This is a better roster than where I was.
But
didn't he say that?
Of course. Okay. This is just a more blunt way to do it. But there are so many. I wish we could get from the grave guest expert Freud on the show. What about the fact that he acknowledges in these tweets that he hoped people wouldn't know was him, that he didn't think he could beat this team. And then he has Nike release sneakers that say, can't beat them, join them. As if that's an unfair arrow being slung at him. Those things written on the sneakers, were those things people were slinging at him on the internet? Or were those things coming from his own head? Wait, have I changed? Because that's on there. Was this kind of the scared move? This is a guy who, if we had told him, hey, here's how the season, if you go to Golden State, you guys win the title, you are one of the front runners for MVP of the league until you get hurt. You then win. You then win Finals MVP. Will that make you happy? I think his answer would have been absolutely. And now he's sitting there this summer. And this summer, what's he done? He goes on a podcast and takes shots at Steph Curry's shoes. That's
we are going to discuss this further.
I think the NBA should change their name, not NBAP. National Basketball Association of Pettiness.
Oh, God. We all held our breath there.
Now joined by Fox NFL analyst and 3-time Super Bowl champion and big fan of Moana, Mark Schlereth.
Yes.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I am
All
doing
around
well.
smart guy.
I'm doing well, and you're welcome.
Okay, it is now Nick Wright's favorite part of the show, Power Rankings time. Yeah. All right, we're going to run through the first few here. Sports Illustrated has the Kansas City Chiefs at number 1, the Falcons at 2, Patriots all the way down at number 3, probably because it's the lowest they've been since birth, Steelers and Raiders rounding out the top 5. So, Mark, I'm going to start with you here. Have the Patriots looked like a top 3 team to you? Were you a little surprised by where they got placed on this list?
I'm not surprised. Do they have Belichick?
Yeah, they do.
Do they have Brady?
Yeah, they do.
I am not surprised at all, and they're not a finished product by any stretch of the imagination. And I think you could look at their defense. I think their back end is pretty good. Mm-hmm. They've had some busts in coverage. I think their front seven. When you look at front sevens around the National Football League, I think that they're probably pretty marginal compared to most.
Yeah,
but here's
middle
the
of the
thing.
pack.
Right. Here's the thing about the New England Patriots. Having played against them a bunch, there's certain teams, and we were talking about intelligence in the break. There are certain teams that test your intelligence as an offense. And I've always looked at them not from a personnel standpoint of being able to really test you, but from a mental standpoint. And what they do to you as a defense is they put you in situations where you're confused. And they have the versatility in their front seven where guys have the duality to play both a D-end and a linebacker. And so they'll put out groupings, and then they'll just stand around. And you have to break a huddle and decide, is this a 4-down front? Is this a 3-down front? Are they in nickel? Are they in base? What are they in? And these are like this is upper level football talk, but it makes it incredibly hard because to block people, especially in pass protection, to block anybody, you have to understand the differences. And so when you have a guy out there, a Nikovic back in the day, right?
Yes.
That can play defensive end or can play outside linebacker, you have to designate that guy. And if half of your team has designated him as a defensive end and half are designating him as a outside linebacker, there's going to be a break in your protection. And they're going to get a sack without physically beating anybody. That's what they do to you on a consistent basis. So they always have had players in their front seven that have the duality to play multiple positions, and it makes it very difficult to designate who's playing what. Therefore, protection breakdowns, that's how they get pressures. That's how they get sacks. That's how they beat you. And this is still, in my mind, the smartest team in football week in, week out.
The Pats are a top 3 team, especially after week number 2, because they got clobbered in week number 1. But that very seldom happens. They have a couple injuries you have to be concerned about. He talked about their defense. We know that they'll be a lot better in November and December. But with Brady and Belichick, they're going to be in the top 5. This offseason that they had, we thought it was going to be a lot better. But seeing Tom Brady healthy, Gronk being semi-healthy, I mean, they're going to be one of the top 3 teams. And the battle with New England is how many games are they going to win? And are they going to have home field advantage? Because they can be anywhere in the top 5. If they get home field advantage, they're number 1 or number 2, depending on the NFC.
And think about this a couple of years ago. Remember when Kansas City went out there a couple of years ago and just absolutely just...
It was in Kansas City.
It was in Kansas City, right.
Yes.
They beat them down. And remember, Brady was done, and, the New England Patriots break up the Patriots. They're no good anymore. And then they just turned around. Remember, Bill Belichick was on to Cincinnati. And then they ran roughshod through the rest of the league and won a Super Bowl. I mean, this is what they are. This is who they are.
That is definitely who they were.
And that went past tense on me, Nick.
Right there.
2 weeks.
That right there is the basis of the entire sporting public, it would seem, at least slightly, if not greatly, overvaluing the Pats right now. It is based on who their coach and quarterback have been. It is based on something they did 3 seasons ago, 4 seasons ago, I guess, actually. You cannot say based on how they've played this season, they're one of the 3 best teams in the sport. They played one other.
Where should they be on the list then?
I did mine. I didn't even know SI was doing there, so I just did mine on Twitter last night.
He does
my
his
top 10.
every day,
No, I do
every
it
day.
No,
3 times a day, Nick.
No,
you're always calling me. Oh, I just got a new list. I put it together. Do you want to hear
I do a lot of lists, but I also do. I'm organized with this.
Nerdo.
Tuesday night NFL Power Rankings at Get Nick Right if you would like to see them. I had the Pats 9. I think that's fair based on how they've played. They played a good team in Kansas City, a Kansas City team we might be slightly overrating as well because we think the Pats are awesome, but a good team, my hometown Chiefs, and the Chiefs went to New England and beat them soundly. They then played a team that I think most people believe to be one of the worst teams in the NFL, and they went to their place and beat them soundly.
One of the worst defenses.
Yes. Well,
and they're a lot better team playing at home.
I think maybe the worst defense.
So make sure you give all the characteristics of who New Orleans.
Okay, well, I think they are one of the worst teams because they have the league's single worst defense. I don't think they have one of the worst defenses. And if we were looking at this team without the proper nouns, just the details on them. Okay, so this offseason, what happened to him? Well, their most reliable receiver went down with an ACL injury. Okay, coming into the year, they were really going to rely on this major free agent acquisition. He has 4 catches for less than 100 yards through 2 games, despite playing 1 game against a terrible defense. Okay, their other big weapon on offense. Well, he's been injury-prone the last few years. He went out in week 2 with an injury. We'll see what happens. All right, what about on defense? Well, the top player they picked in the draft, he's on the IR, a player they traded a draft pick for. They already cut him. They play the same area because they're trying to upgrade their pass rush. Another pass rusher, Shea McClellan, he's on the IR. We would be saying, oh, okay, even though greatest quarterback ever in the argument, if not the number one, greatest coach ever in the argument, if not the number one, they have some bigger issues. The Patriots are being given, they deserve the benefit of the doubt. I don't know that they deserve this expansive benefit of the doubt they're being given.
I would look at them like this, and I think this is like the easiest thing in the world to do as a fan of anything. I don't follow basketball, but I can watch a basketball game and know that Russell Westbrook is the best athlete on the planet. I can just, it doesn't take any sports acumen for me to understand that. I can see that. And I think it's easy to look at talent. It's easy to print up a roster and go, wow, their front 7 is pretty marginalized.
Yeah.
You know, they've got some issues with their receivers. I know that winning football games is more about your understanding of how to exploit another team's weaknesses and your understanding of football in general, having enough football acumen to be able to do those things. So it's so much more than talent to me. That's what this game is.
We believe in the systems more than we believe in talent. Because all 32 teams have talent.
Yeah, you got to have great talent, but you've got to be able to put that talent in positions to win. And that's what they do better than anybody else. So I am going to continue to give the Patriots, and I understand your arguments, and they're good arguments, but I'm going to continue to give them the benefit of the doubt because I know how smart they are as a football team.
I mean, they are a proven commodity. For me, intellectually, I've been battling Bill Belichick since 1987. That's when he was the defensive coordinator with Bill Parcells of the New York Football Giants. Played him twice a year, all right, for 3 years before I went to Minnesota. So I followed his career. I've played against his defenses a bunch of times. And forget about the list for 2 games. There's respect for what these guys have done in this league. Now, you had a bevy of things that you're poking holes in. Now, those 8 teams you have in front of them, give me the laundry list of them. Like, what makes these teams so perfect?
No, nobody's saying...
Because it's a lot of bad football out there right now.
Correct.
And you got 8 teams that you have seen with your eye that you think that they're going to be able to beat Belichick and Brady? Like, that's an interesting take.
Okay, but so if it is not the argument that there is a perfect team or a flawless team. But the argument is this. If you are a team that, when we're doing these lists, when we're doing these rankings, you've lost, as opposed to a team that has not lost.
Yes.
If you're a 2-0, take the Carolina Panthers, for instance, right? They obviously have issues protecting Cam.
Right.
Cam has had issues coming back from the injury. I thought Game 2 was better than Game 1, but he hasn't looked great. However, they're yet to lose. You tell me every day on this show that pro football It is week to week. Can you get the win? So if you guys are giving the Patriots a benefit of the doubt based on history, that I am giving the other 2-0 teams in the league. I have them 9th. 7 teams are undefeated. 7 teams right now are 2-0.
Real quick question. Do you have Pittsburgh listed ahead of the New England Patriots?
I have Pittsburgh number 1.
Okay. So let me ask you this. If Pittsburgh were to play on a neutral site, the New England Patriots, based on history and based on the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers have not been able to stop that offense, they have not been able to contain Tom Brady in that offense, would you pick Pittsburgh or would you pick New England?
Based on history? No. Based on this year?
But Nick,
yes.
You can't.
I can't take the history out.
I understand your argument about based on history. I understand game to game. I understand let's just focus on Sunday. But if there's one thing that every single guest, every single person that has sat in that chair has said, the one consistent thing,
they don't like
it's that do not bet.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is do not bet against the Patriots until they give you reason to.
They gave us reason.
No, they didn't.
Nick,
they came back.
Give me your top 3 teams.
They came.
Give me your top 3
Pittsburgh?
teams. No,
Pittsburgh 1.
Okay.
Kansas City 2.
Okay, wait a second. You and the Kansas City fans, how excited are you for your team to go 14-2 and you can't wait to get the bye and that first wait a second.
About this.
Wait a second.
You're right about
What
this.
about that first divisional playoff game with Andy Reid and all the lack the lack of success?
You're right about that.
Okay, what's team number 3?
Oakland.
Okay.
What about that defense?
That was my big concern with Oakland coming into this year. I've been very impressed with how they played through 2 weeks.
You said you were concerned about Marshawn Lynch, too, as we get later in the year now. Him wearing out, right?
Absolutely right.
Okay.
Absolutely right, which is why there's a difference between, by the way, power rankings and prognostications, and you bringing up my hometown Chiefs' litany of playoff failures is dirty pool, and I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, I told you. That's
trying to give me
way,
post-traumatic stress at 7:11 a.m.
Dallas Cowboys coming in 9th on that list. Seems like everybody has been piling on to Ezekiel Elliott, except my kid, by the way, all week for Zeke's lack of effort after an interception against Denver. Didn't help that Zeke had just 8 yards in the game. Some good news for Elliott. Owner Jerry Jones is coming to his defense, saying Zeke isn't the only player to blame.
Well, I think if you look at everybody's reaction to that interception, you could have, if you really looked at several Dallas Cowboy players on that interception, you saw what would not, I think, be the case in a closely contested ball game. I think you can point to Zeke, but you really have to look at the general effort to chase that ball down by most of the people that were on the field. Dak now, of course, gave it everything he had to try to contain that interception, but still, you look at it across the board, you'll need more effort than what you see.
Mark, we've all been piling on to Zeke this
Sure,
week.
you should.
Is it?
You should pile.
Dog pile.
Right.
Oh, there you go. I was just going to ask you if it's too much. Is it overblown? Okay, there you go.
Listen, what is his biggest issue, right? Legitimately, on the field, off the field, emotional maturity. Right? He has made mistakes from an emotional and a maturity standpoint. And I understand, I've had, believe it or not, I've had my butt handed to me many, many times on a football field. Mm-hmm. The thing is you look at the film on Monday, man, and there is no worse feeling in the world when you look at your film and you haven't sold out for your teammates. You don't sell out for your teammates. That effort by the Dallas Cowboys is why they can't win a playoff game. That effort by the Dallas Cowboys is why they won't win a playoff game. If you're not sold out for the people that you play with, great leadership comes when you care more about the people you lead than you care about yourself. And that, to me, is selfish football that will never lead to championship football.
Does it matter what kind of player or who you are? Because CC was saying all week that, like, Randy Moss took plays off. You've seen guys take play off, and sometimes you say something and sometimes you don't.
In context for which I said it, Randy Moss also ran 50 yards down the field more than anyone in football.
No. That's why I said
there was an understanding that for him to do his job, yes. Now, Randy didn't verbalize it the right way, the way you like football players to do it. Have I seen other players, interior linemen, take plays off? I'm not trying to make an excuse for Zeke. I'm saying this happens all the time, but it will be addressed. Like, this is the core of a football player. and the team. I will play as hard as I can and as long as I can. I'll give you guys an example. Larry Allen, one of the great guards that ever played this game. He got, use your word, mollywopped by Reggie White. Reggie White abused him. He was embarrassed. He could barely sleep. Went to the weight room the next day and began to bench press. And in his mind, he said, that will never happen to me again. His own personal pride led him from that butt whooping he took from Reggie White, led him all the way to the halls of George Halas Hall to Canton. Now, there's players that will respond in different ways under adversity. Zeke did not respond the way we would want him to respond as a football player, and his biggest problem is he's not self-aware. And that's what's got him in problems off the field, and now that's what's getting him criticized, and everyone's dogpiling on him now because of that play.
Well, and this is, and you speak to what is my only real concern with this. Because listen, we talked about it Monday. I said it's a bad look. I did not think it would be a 3-day story. I didn't think people were going to be this worked up about it. I do not think it's a federal case. I think it happens. It happens. Zeke's a very prominent player. The cameras happen to catch the perfect angle of it. It's the Cowboys, so we discuss it. My one lingering concern is the game in which it happened. We have only seen Ezekiel Elliott have one bad football game as a pro. And we have only seen him do this once as a pro. If this was a game the Cowboys are losing, but he has 125 yards and he does this, then I just think, okay, listen, the guy spaced for a moment, took a play off. My only lingering concern is because he's going to face more adversity. Like, this was his first NFL adversity on the field, but every player in league history, no matter how great, has a bunch of bad games, has a bunch of adversity. The concern is does he disengage if he is not succeeding on an individual level? That's the thing that I'm curious to see moving forward.
I think here's something very interesting. And the Broncos defense will do this to you. Remember the Super Bowl with Cam Newton? I mean, they went, they struggled the next year. Remember when Aaron Rodgers went in there in 2015 and for about 6 weeks after, he didn't look like Aaron Rodgers? Yes. They'll do that to you. This defense will do that to you. This is the first time I've ever seen Dak Prescott look like a young quarterback. It's the first time. The first time I have ever seen him look like a young quarterback was Sunday. And that's the type of effort, your all-star running back, where you really want a guy to come out there. Listen, I understand 9 carries, 8 yards. It's a frustrating day. It's a frustrating day.
We've all had them, though.
Right. But, like, your team and your young quarterback is struggling, man. We need to all be kind of in this thing together. And it's just a bad look, and it's not a championship level effort.
You mentioned you've all had them. I wonder if the first is always the hardest. Because I can't think of, what's the last time Ezekiel Elliott struggled on the field? Not once in his rookie year.
Right.
Maybe never at Ohio State. Yeah. Probably kicked people's butt in high school.
He struggled at Ohio State, the Michigan State game, when he didn't give the ball, and he had the press conference afterwards and told the people he was healthy and should have been running.
But he wasn't ineffective. He just wasn't given the opportunities.
He also broke his wrist early in his career, which didn't allow him to play.
Right.
But the one thing that we're looking for, Nick, from our teammates, we're not worrying about having bad plays. We're worrying about what they're going to do when they have bad plays, because we all get bust straight in the nose. It happens week in, week out to the greatest players. But what you care about as a teammate, man, can I depend on you? Mm-hmm. Come hell or high water, can I depend? You got my back? Yeah. We used to have a roll call around the locker room. It wasn't to find out what the guys' names were. It was to find out who was here to play football. And when they had roll call in Denver, Zeke didn't show up. Everyone else checked in for the game. But Zeke did not check in. And that's one of the fundamentals that we do in football, all right? We're going to check in together, and you know what? We're going to all check out together. Right. And that's when the game is done. And that's just something that he's going to have to overcome within his locker room, because his teammates, Zeke hasn't let them down. I know he's getting a lot of heat from fans and everything. His teammates have video of him playing with tremendous effort, and they know this play is an outlier. Mm-hmm. So I don't see it as a problem moving forward, especially if he doesn't show that behavior.
You hope that it's a learning experience, and I understand the frustration, and we've all been there from the frustration. But with that, even when you're struggling, like, you're struggling, things aren't going your way. We've all been there. At least you, as my opponent, you're going to walk away with a bloody nose. I may have got my butt whipped for 64 plays, but you're walking away with a bloody nose.
You will be sore tomorrow.
It's going to be a street fight. And that's the thing that bothers you.
Dude, man.
No, I'm not. I'm the nicest guy in the world.
Wait, guys, did we hear from Zeke? Did Zeke ever talk about this? Have we heard?
Yet.
He has not said anything about it.
Because after the game, I don't think he was asked about it, and he hasn't been available since.
The Giants haven't been able to get anything going on offense. 13 points in 2 games, not so great. And this isn't anything great either. They were 26th in scoring last season. Head coach Ben McAdoo addressed his concerns yesterday.
We got to learn to get out of our own way. We had some failures last night, and failures aren't fatal, but failure to learn from it might be. So, we're not going to panic. We're not the first good team to start 0-2. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. That's insanity. It's not working. So we're going to look to make some changes this week, like we did last week, maybe a little more drastic.
Coach Eric Mangini still with us. Coach, does McAdoo need to give up play calling to right the wrongs on this team? Is he just a little overwhelmed by his to-do list when the game starts?
It is very hard to call plays and then be the head coach. It's hard because you've got to think through what's happening in the next series. Your defense is on the sideline at that point. You're not involved with the things that they're doing, the adjustments they're making, things that come up on special teams. You're present, but you're also talking to the offensive coaches to figure out things that went well the last series, things that didn't go well. I think wearing both of those hats is extremely difficult, and you need to be the head coach of the whole team. Now, some people have done it really successfully. I do think there is significant value to overseeing it and then trumping calls that you don't like or guiding it, but flexible enough so that you can deal with everything else that's going on in the game.
Yes, and sometimes as a head coach, but we've had this debate for years. Guys who are proven coordinators, and once they become the head coach, been able to manage all those responsibilities that go on in a chaotic sideline. Not smooth. I'm talking about chaos is on the NFL sideline. So that's a normal criticism. But is there someone better equipped to call plays on the staff? So before we say, Ben McAdoo, he shouldn't be calling plays, there's not a proven play caller on their staff that I'm going to take this hard responsibility that I believe only a few people are good at and hand it to someone just because the optics outside, the fans are saying that I don't believe he can handle the responsibility.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think you do something for the optics. If that's why you're doing it, and you're worried about what the fans say and you're worried about what the pressure is externally, you're probably in the wrong business. And if you're willing to change because of those things, that to me is a mistake. If you're willing to change because you feel like it's going to make you more effective as a head coach, it's going to make your team more effective, then to me that's a really smart decision. Now, maybe there isn't anybody better to call those plays, but he can still guide it all during the week. You can set up the call sheet. During the game, you can be on the line. You can evaluate how the guy does. But you've got to have a relationship with the other two phases, and you've got to be involved with those parts.
Here's what I know. If he's going to continue calling plays, he's going to have to show that it's not overwhelming him from his most primary responsibilities as the head coach. Cris, who is the only person other than players that can call a timeout for the team?
Head coach.
Head coach. And we saw when this game is still in the balance into the first half against the Lions. The Lions get stopped on a 3rd and 10. It is 4th and 3 on the 38-yard line with 1:15 left. It's a 7-point game. New York has all 3 timeouts. Inexplicably and indefensibly, Ben McAdoo doesn't recognize time, score, situation, doesn't call timeout, and deprives his team of a chance. That kick hit the crossbar. It's a 56-yarder. That is a less than 50% chance you're going to make that kick. You had the opportunity to have the ball at the 40, around the 40, with 1:10 left, 2 timeouts to go score yourself. If he had to do that, he was asked about it yesterday. He said, I was worried that they were going to go for it on 4th. That's not a good justification.
Well, actually, I was just thinking about it. When you make that decision to take a timeout there and they go on the sideline and they figure out, oh, this is a really good 4th down play that we like, one of those got-to-have-it plays we talked about yesterday, you've got that situation as opposed to them coming out and having to kick the field goal. And look, let me just say something about time management. It is really, really nice to be able to talk about time management here. But when you're in the moment, you have people in the box who are trying to help you out. You've gone through different scenarios, but it's not perfect.
Well, so this is my question, and I brought this up to Cris before the show, and he almost, for the first time in our relationship, he almost struck me. So I'm now going to bring it up to you, since you're between us.
I wouldn't say that's the first time.
We see,
Coach.
We see,
Come on, man.
in other sports, teams go outside of the sport to add intelligence. We saw the movie Moneyball and the book Billy Bean's. We saw how did they pick players? They had a kid from Yale who knew very little about baseball build an algorithm. We've seen the Philadelphia 76ers. How are we going to rebuild the team? We are going to essentially go into the finance MIT world to figure out the best process. Daryl Morey, similar, an MIT guy running the Rockets. Why is football? What would be wrong with this? Hey, the head coach does have too much on his plate. It is difficult. If people on their couches are yelling, you got to use a timeout, and the football coach, who knows more than us, isn't recognizing it, why can you not assign a guy whose only job is know when to use your timeouts? Understand before the 2-minute warning, after the 2-minute warning. Understand the math of we got to take it right now if we're going to do this, and have that be his only job. You'd be a $50,000 a year weekend job for a smart guy. What's wrong with that?
I had the former head of replay officials who had retired the year before helping me out in Cleveland with challenges, and it wasn't 100%. And that's no knock on him. This is the guy who made every single decision as to whether or not it was the right or wrong thing when you made a challenge, who now is on the payroll, who was working with us during the week, who was coaching our officials that we had at every single practice. And in real time, there were times where we didn't make the right decision. So I can tell you that even when you bring in the experts, even when you bring in the math, even when you bring in all those things, there's going to be mistakes that are made. Is it what you're looking for? No. But sitting here and talking about it, yeah. God, that's so much better.
Wait, Coach, can we just get back to the Giants for a second? Let's get Giants specific. You want to talk about removing play calling duties. CC brought up a good point. Maybe there's no one else that can. So let's get down to this actual offense. Is there someone else on this team who you think can do a better job play calling, or should it be Ben McAdoo and he just has to get himself, I don't know what the word is, better organized?
No, Ben McAdoo is organized. It's so easy to blame the coach because all the plays are designed to have success. But you know what comes into play, Jenna? They're human beings. And you know what happens? It's human beings going against other human beings who are really, really talented. So a lot of times, we as fans, prognosticators, analysts, we don't want to blame the players because we don't really like talking about the players. But the Giants got a lot of players on their offense that are not very good. All right? So it's his job to come up with some type of system that they can have offensive success. I don't think it has anything to do with the play calling. I don't think it has anything to do with their problems, but it's a nice way to be able to move the conversation to now that guy shouldn't be calling plays. They've done a bad job as far as putting help around this roster. Now, he had a couple different looks in the game that were good looks. Brandon Marshall, late in the game, if he catches that ball, do you question the play calling? Eli Manning, when they have 4th down, the clock is right in front of him, all right? It's through the end zone, about the eye level of the goalpost to his right. He's looking at the play clock, unless they're in a no huddle, every single play. If he would have called timeout, we wouldn't be talking about this. So what's subject to the play caller, what's subject to the plays, is a human being doing his job. And the Giants have more players getting whooped in their individual battles than they do X and O mistakes. So that guy should keep calling the plays. If y'all want someone to complain at, look at them people up in front blocking, all right? Because they haven't done a good job, and they're getting paid a lot of money to do that.
So we are joined by our lead college football analyst and greatest transitioner of all time. That's me, Joel Klatt. Hey, Joel, how are you?
A real quarterback with no excuses.
Fantastic. How are you guys today?
Joel, our guy.
All right, let's dive right in, Joel. Starting off with last week, you called the Texas USC thriller. Even though they lost in overtime, you believe Texas is back?
The only reason I laugh is because I feel like we've talked about this so many times before with Texas, and I understand that they're trying to chase this ghost of past success. But what I loved about Saturday night was they were no longer chasing that ghost. For me, that was the cornerstone, kind of a foundational piece for Tom Herman moving forward so that they can achieve some sort of future identity. Listen, it felt different than past performances, certainly, namely because their defensive front seven. Poona Ford, their nose tackle, he was dominant in the middle of that defensive front seven. Malik Jefferson played the best game he's ever played in a Texas uniform. But the only thing that I would say is we've got to pump our brakes. First of all, they got to figure out their quarterback position because Sam Ehlinger could not throw the ball on a consistent basis on Saturday night. And we've seen this before. They beat Oklahoma 2 years ago in a year in which Oklahoma went to the playoff. We could have said they were back then. They beat Notre Dame early last year. A lot of us, including myself, said, boy, that's a cornerstone landmark win for Charlie Strong, and it didn't pan out. We need to see consistent effort from Texas before we can say that they're back.
Joe, I want to stay at that game, USC. Their quarterback, Sam Darnold, it seems like every week we need new information. I saw him make a couple brilliant plays. Do I personally need to pump my brakes on Sam Darnold? Or what did you see, or a couple things you might have saw in week number 2 that stood out as far as Sam Darnold?
Well, the thing about Sam is that there's only a few players on either level that you can say that the team can be on their back and they'll still succeed. And he can take you to a win. And that's what I saw Saturday night from Sam Darnold. He was average at times, yes, but when his best was needed, he was there. And you've heard the old adage, and I just kind of touched on it, that like great players play their best when their best is needed. But I actually don't quite buy into that because to me, and maybe Cris, you would have a thought on this as well, I think great players are great when greatness is required. And what I saw with down 3, inside of 40 seconds left on your own side of the 50, greatness was required. It wasn't like, hey, we need you to play your best. Anyone can go out there and do their best. I mean, greatness was required, and Darnold rose to that level, drove him down there, got the game-tying field goal, and then won it in overtime. That was pretty special, and there are only a few guys out there that have that type of ability.
And in that game, shout out to the true freshman walk-on kicker that hit a couple huge kicks. But I want to talk about your game this week, Notre Dame, Michigan, 2 teams that have struggled somewhat last year. What do you think they're beginning to start this season?
Yeah, so Notre Dame, and I'll be headed up to East Lansing, and Michigan State obviously went 3-9 a year ago. Both programs need a bounce back. And to me, going into the season, there was 2 huge questions, one for each team. Notre Dame had to get over the fact that they were losing so many one-possession games because that was really their bugaboo a year ago. And Michigan State needed to solve the quarterback position. So that's what you needed to see in the first few weeks of this season to see if they had answered those questions and they were ready to move forward. On the Notre Dame side, they changed their staff. They did a lot of different things with Brian Kelly there. And yet they come out and in their first opportunity to win a one-possession game, they weren't able to do so. So they lose to Georgia at home in a game that was winnable, and they didn't run the ball very well. So they lose 20-19 in a one-point game. So that question remains to be answered. Meanwhile, on the Michigan State side, they had to solve that quarterback issue because Mark D'Antonio, throughout his career at Michigan State, he's always had that stalwart at quarterback, whether it was Kirk Cousins or even a guy like Connor Cook. They had had so much success with that pocket passer. And so now they seem to have found a player, a guy that they really like, that they think can control the game from the pocket, but also has some elusiveness and running ability on the outside. Brian Lewerke. And at least through 2 games this year for Michigan State, they seem to have answered that question in the affirmative. So Notre Dame right now still seeking some answers, whereas Michigan State thinks that they're building on something with that quarterback, Brian Lewerke.
Hey, Joel, taking a look at the earlier game on Fox, Michigan against Purdue, Michigan struggled with its last 2 opponents, particularly in the red zone. You concerned about their offense moving forward?
No doubt. I mean, that's the most important zone on the field. You've got to be able to score touchdowns. You kick field goals, you're going to get beat, in particular in the college game. And one thing that I know about the red zone, right, when the field starts to condense down, it does 2 things to put stress on your offense. One, it becomes more difficult to run the football because you just can't block everybody. The safeties are too close to the line of scrimmage. And 2, the throwing windows start to condense and they start to get tighter just based on space. So accuracy from your quarterback becomes paramount. And Wilton Speight has just not been a very accurate passer during the first few games of this season. He's had guys open. And if you watch some of their games and watch their tape, He's had players open down in the red zone, and he'll overthrow them or throw it at their feet. He has to play better because 1 for 10 in the red zone when it comes to red zone possessions and touchdowns scored is not going to get it done. This is a team that I think is everywhere else built for the playoff. But if they don't get that red zone scoring offense fixed, they're going to be in some trouble when they face the likes of Penn State or Ohio State.
Joe, inconsistent passing. You mentioned Ohio State. They'll be a heavy favorite for the next 4 weeks. What can I expect, Joe? Because 2 weeks ago, I left the Horseshoe feeling like I was Baker. I was Baker Mayfield. That's what I was. All right? He stuck a stake in our heart. What do you see from the Buckeyes as far as evolving as a team and their lack of passing game?
Oh, well, first of all, condolences because having a flag jammed in the Block O.
But you said you love that. That's the college spirit. I was watching you.
On the inside for UCC. But Ohio State, here's why I'm not concerned with Ohio State, is because, well, 3 things, namely. One is those coaches did not forget how to coach, and that is a great coaching staff led by Urban Meyer. They've got 2 great coordinators. I mean great coordinators. One from the NFL level who had a lot of success at Rutgers named Greg Schiano. The other who has been a terrific head coach and a wildly successful offensive coordinator in his career, and Kevin Wilson. They did not forget how to coach football, so they should be fine. They will figure things out. The other is their roster. Cris, that roster is one of the best rosters, if not the best roster in all of college football. They've got a great front 7 on the defensive side. They've got skill on the offensive side with a pretty good offensive line. They will figure that out. And then the last thing is, in college football, your resume has everything to do with your ability to get into the playoff, and they have still got a lot of bullets in the chamber when it comes to resume builders. Remember, they're going to face Penn State at home. They've got Michigan on the road. Those 2 teams likely to be in the top 10 when they face them, and then potentially a matchup with Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game. If they were to get there, Wisconsin would likely be in the top 10 at that point as well. So you're talking about 3 more opportunities to face top 10 opponents, and if they win all those 3, I don't want to guarantee, but I'll go on a long limb and say Ohio State would be in the playoff if they were to win out. So I'm not concerned about the Buckeyes right now.
Joel, we got about 60 seconds here. I just want to go back to the result that surprised me the most last week. I wasn't surprised that Clemson beat Louisville. I was very surprised that Lamar Jackson struggled as much as he did and that it wasn't a good game. What do you make of that, and what do you make of Lamar's struggles?
Yeah, so you could kind of see that one coming because Louisville struggled with Purdue. Around Lamar Jackson, they're not a very good football team right now. They're not very strong on the defensive side, and they don't block well up front. That offensive line has been protected by the human highlight reel that is Lamar Jackson for quite some time. So you can see this building. They struggle with North Carolina. And Clemson is better than we thought. Remember, their biggest question coming into the season was Kelly Bryant, their quarterback. Would he be able to replace Deshaun Watson? He's answered that in the affirmative. That is a great defense led by Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator. Clemson is primed for another playoff run. This is going to be the 3rd straight year, I believe, that they're going to be in the college football playoff.
Thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Remember, leave us a review and tell us what you think. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and catch us on FS1 Monday through Friday, 6:30 a.m. Eastern on FS1. For Cris Carter and Nick Wright, I'm Jenna Wolf. So long, everybody.